Joining us now for more on this issue is Dr. David Adesnik, Senior Fellow and Director of Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and he's joining us from Washington, D.C. And thanks for joining us, David. I want to just read back. You had an interesting tweet a couple of days ago on this issue. You wrote, Biden is pushing harder for Saudi human rights than any other president, and he got results even before Friday's report. I'll take results over vengeance. What do you mean by that?
Sure. So one of the remarkable things is that even before this announcement happened, the Saudis released Loujain al-Hathloul, a women's rights activist who'd been imprisoned, allegedly tortured while in prison. They released a number of Saudi U.S. dual citizens. There was clearly a preemptive sense that they had to show a measure of commitment to reform and a desire to placate the Biden administration. And clearly there's been a lot of criticism of Biden for not going far enough. But I think the point is, so far, he's gone further than any other U.S. administration has in pushing the Saudis on human rights. And what's often driving the desire to go further is just sort of a unique singling out of MBS, even when there's a lot of quite bad human rights abusers in the region. I firmly favor a stronger human rights policy. I think Trump's policy in that regard had tremendous shortcomings, but I think Biden is striking the right balance.
Right, now striking the right balance, but at the same time, we did have, for example, President Biden making the point of saying he spoke on the phone with King Salman, not with Mohammed bin Salman. What kind of impact do you think that has in Riyadh? I don't know if you could call it, I mean, obviously he's speaking as a leader of a country to a leader of a country. Some people say MBS is in fact the de facto leader, but what kind of impact do you think that has in Riyadh itself?
No, I think it's the message that this U.S. administration to embarrass the Saudi and I think that matters on the world stage. I think that it's not as severe as sanctioning him, but it's sending a very clear message that we are going to behave in a way that really only a superpower might behave toward an ally without comparable strength. And while many people want more, it's a pretty strong warning shot. And I think the State Department spokesman was right to emphasize that there is a look to the future here, that if what has been done so far gets Saudi Arabia to improve its behavior, that's better than just trying to be vindictive regarding past behavior.
Right. Now, there are, of course, other measures that the Biden administration has taken regarding Saudi Arabia. For example, backing down from the support for the Saudi-led coalition in the war against Yemen's Houthi rebels. I mean, how much of that do you see as a recalibration of U.S.-Saudi relations beyond just, for example, the Khashoggi case?
Well, I think it's important to appreciate the extent of the congressional backlash against the war in Yemen. Saudis have not always been the most responsible actors there. The targeting of their bombing, too often it's been civilians, although often I think there's also a failure to balance and recognize the pretty grave human rights violations that the Iranian-backed Houthis have committed. And in fact, some of the harshest critics of Saudi Arabia don't even seem to recognize, as the Obama administration did, that Iran is backing the Houthi rebels. So in part, I do think it's a response to that backlash. It's also, there was a reversal of the terrorism designation of the Houthis that Trump issued in his final days in office. I think that had to do a lot with the humanitarian situation. I'm not sure there was a real need to reverse it. There are other ways to ensure that aid can arrive, but I don't think that was so much directed at the Saudis, but there was also the suspension of certain arms purchases, review of pending purchases. There was actually a move on tariffs regarding the Emirates who were involved in this situation. So there's no question. There's been several measures across the board indicating we are going to do things differently than our predecessors did.
Right. Now, briefly, let me ask you, and what about re-entering negotiations with Iran? The Biden administration said it would consult with its allies in the region, Israel and presumably Saudi Arabia. How do you think that is going to impact?
Well, I think they will consult. I'm not sure how much they really intend to accept the objections. In part, what I hope is that if Biden takes a very firm line on human rights and says we have problems engaging or having warm relations with serious human rights violators, when it comes time to try and rejoin negotiations with Iran, its gross human rights violations will be on the table. That there's justifiable outrage over Khashoggi's murder, but in the time since he was murdered, Iran gunned down 1,500 peaceful protesters. It's also attacked its own dissidents and defectors abroad. It continues to use torture to extract confessions. So, for those of us who have concerns about the Iran nuclear deal, it's actually a welcome thing. We'll have to leave it at there. David Adesnik at FDD. Thank you for that.